friends, my name is Lilly. Today I'm here in my basement because I want to find the right arrows for this bow here. Oof! Okay, let's see what happens. So apparently I hit another arrow, this one here. Oh my god, I have split another arrow. Oh my god. This is a recurve bow. It's called Black Hunter. A couple of years ago the company MandarinDuck gave it to me for a review, and it's a really good bow. It shoots really well, and yeah, it's also pretty cheap, so it's a very good bow for beginners, and it's very affordable. And I've shot this bow a couple of times. I liked it, but I had so many bows, and then I had this one friend and she needed a bow, so I just gave her this one for free. And the only thing that we need to do now is I want to find good arrows for her now. So which are the perfect arrows for this bow? Now the only thing is that just because I'm testing this bow today with a couple of different arrows, it doesn't mean that this will be the perfect arrow for you, because my draw length is different, okay? This is the reason why you cannot do this test for another person, except this other person has the same draw length like you. So if you want to do some arrow tuning for a friend, it's only working out if he or she has the same draw length. So now let's start with the actual selection of the arrows. Let me show you something. Alright folks, so I have prepared everything for the paper test. Now for the arrows themselves, I've chosen these ones. These are called the Cross X Madeira, and these are actually a little bit cheaper than the big brands out there. And I've tried them for half a year now for my bow, and I couldn't say anything bad about them, so I'm really happy with this brand. Also the GPI is really lightweight, so this arrow here, which has a spine of 700, comes with a GPI of 5.9. That's really lightweight. So the GPI is grains per inch, which is a good thing and makes the arrow faster. However, when it's really lightweight, you will also have a little bit less stability. So if you're hitting a stone, for example, it might happen that this very lightweight arrow breaks more easily and faster than a heavier arrow. Now the next arrow that I have here is 600 spine, which has a GPI of 6.8, so it's a little bit heavier. And then I also have 800 spine, which has a GPI of 5.8. So these are actually almost the same weight as the 700. So now I have my arrows here, and they are standard length, which is too long. And usually I cut my arrows off at 28 inches. Okay, so this is 28 inches. So I have to cut this much off, and when you are cutting off the arrows, the arrow will get shorter, and then you will have a different spine. So then the GPI is still the same, but because it's shorter, it will get stiffer. Imagine trying to bend a pencil, and the shorter you make it, the more difficult it will get to bend it. And this is what you have to consider when you are cutting off arrows. Now, why should you cut off arrows? Why not leave it like this? Well, if you leave it like this, you will have this much of arrow sticking out, and actually you don't need this much arrow to stick out. It will only make the arrow heavier, and then you will have a slower arrow. So this excess length is not really needed, and that's why in general you want to cut off your arrows as short as possible. So now I'm taping the arrows. Now I'm going to cut the first arrow. And make sure that you cut it straight and not in an angle like this or like that. Okay, this one is blunt. I have to use my bigger saw here. Okay, we have a pretty clean cut, but I want to use the sander because I have one corner here that's sticking out. Okay, now it's time to put in an insert. The insert is this aluminum thing which goes into here, but you also want to glue this into the arrow so that it doesn't come out when you're pulling out the arrows out of a target. And for gluing this in, I'm actually using hot glue, and I've had really good experiences with hot glue because it's very soft and not so brittle like other glues, and it can take a lot of vibration because every time you're shooting this arrow, the tip will vibrate a little bit, and when other glues are breaking already, this one is still going strong because it's so tough. And that's why I really like to use hot glue. And for the tips, I'm using these ones. These tips here are 85 grains, and 85 is really the minimum weight for a tip that I would use for an arrow. If you go with less weight, then the arrows won't really stick in the target, so you need a little bit of weight on the tip to make sure that you have some penetration. So I think this is good. It's still heavy enough that you have penetration, but it's not too heavy to slow down the arrow. So I'm really a big fan of 85 grains. Okay, so now I want to show you details of this tip here. And this tip is called top head, and it's stainless steel, which is important. And most importantly, it has an O-ring. So this really sticks to your insert and it stays this way. In the past, I was shooting tips without an O-ring. First of all, those were carbon steel and I had some rusty spots on them. And second of all, if you don't have an O-ring, then the tip will get loose after every shot and you have to twist in the tips of the arrows again, which is very annoying. So if you have an O-ring, you only have to do that like every 10 times you're shooting an arrow. And that's why I only recommend tips with an O-ring anymore. So now I want to put some glue, some hot glue onto the insert. I just warm up the glue, taking this insert and put around the hot glue, make it stick. And then what you do is you want to very carefully heat the tip up, but make sure that it's not too hot. And now it's hot enough so I can push this in, like so. And now you wait until the glue has cooled down and then you can take it off. Okay, now I want to cut off the other arrows. I will come back to you when this is done. Okay, now the arrows are cleaned up and I have written 28 inches on every arrow so that I know in future which length this is. And now for the paper test, you can either use bare shafts or you can put on fletching, and then later when you have made your selection you can do the paper test again after you have put on your fletching. And you can test the arrows at short distances, but also you can test the arrows at longer distances by putting the paper test at a farther distance. So everything is possible. Alright folks, so now it's time for the actual paper test. And I've already set up my frame that I've made. And in here I have a piece of paper. And this frame is important that it's very stable, so it makes no sense if you just hang a piece of paper because it always will bend. So that's why you need a stable frame to make sure that the piece of paper is straight. And the next thing is you want to set this up completely perpendicular to your position, and also this should be straight here, so it should not be tilted like this. Okay, and first I want to shoot the softest arrows which have a spine of 800. Whoa! Oh my god! Wow! Okay, look at this. This is how the arrows ripped out with a spine of 800. So the tip is to the right and the bottom is to the left, okay? It was the same for every arrow. And that's a really bad flight. Okay, that's 800. Now let's try a different spine. Whoops. Okay, next I'm using the spine 700. Let's see if there's a difference. Okay, these arrows still rip out to the left, but it's much better than before. So this here was 800, which was much worse than 700. So it seems as if the bow likes stiffer arrows. The knock is to the right now. Alrighty, so these are my findings so far. So the first picture here was quite far to the left. It was shot with an 800 spine arrow, this one here. And it has a GPI of 5.8. The next arrow was this one here, 700. And it had a much better shooting picture. It was only a little bit to the left. And this one has a GPI of 5.9, so it's not so much different than this one here. Actually, these are really similar. And then the 600 is to the right. Okay, so it was changing the direction. Now the knock is to the right, and it seems as if this arrow is much too stiff. And also the GPI is quite different. So here we are much closer. There's only 0.1 grain difference between these arrows, and this arrow is almost 1 grain heavier than the others. So it's quite a lot stiffer actually, judging from the paper test. So it's not really consistent, right? If I was a company which produces arrows, I would like to have a consistent, you know, increase of stiffness. But here it's quite a little bit more, and that's pretty interesting. So what can I do now? I could use this arrow here, and this should be less stiff. So how can I make this arrow less stiff now? Because I already cut it off at 28 inches. Well, I can use a tip which is heavier. So now let's try the 600 grain arrow with a heavier tip. Okay, so here I have a couple of tips which have 100 grains. So they are a little bit heavier, and they should make the arrow bend more so that it's not so stiff anymore. Okay, this is better now than before. So these are the same arrows, but here I have a heavier tip. So now I'm going to order these arrows, and I want to cut them off a little bit longer, because then I should have a circular hole through the paper, and then they should be perfect for this bow. Okay folks, so I have bought a pack, a dozen of these arrows with the spine 600. And now I want to take out one arrow and cut it off a little bit longer than before. Now I'm shooting an arrow with 600 spine, and it has 28.5 inches. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it's a circle. Let's try one more time. Nice. Okay, we got it. So this was the picture with 28 inches, 100 grain tip. And this is the picture with an arrow which is half an inch longer, and it's perfect. So it won't get any better than this. For the end of the video, I just want to sum up what we learned today. So with the Cross-X Madeira with 600 spine, I have shot like this with 85 grains and 28 inches. Then I changed to a heavier tip with 100 grains. The length of the arrow was still the same. It got a little bit better, but not perfect. And then I just cut off the arrow a little bit longer, and with the 100 grain tip we had an almost perfect rip through. And now I know that I have to cut off these arrows to 28.5 inches, and I have to use the 100 grain tips to guarantee a perfect flight. And I don't think that any calculator in the world can tell you the exact measurements like this. So it really depends on the bow. Are you shooting a recurve bow, a horse bow, a compound bow? And you know, with compound bows it's much more easier because you can adjust the arrow rest, and then you will get a better arrow flight with having the same spine and the same length. But with recurve bows you cannot do that. And this is why you have to play around so much with the weight of the tip and the length of the arrow. So yeah, now I'm going to make these arrows and put some pledging on, and then finally I can give them as a gift to my friend. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned till next time.